This video is probably gonna say some interesting things about me, isn't it? I've often come into direct conflict with other MCU and comic book fans when it comes to characterization and storytelling. It's clear we both have very different priorities when it comes to what we actually want out of these stories. Many comic book fans are insistent that the movies must follow the comics to a T and get irrationally upset when the movies try and do something new or different, and I've never understood that. The biggest example of this would be Spider-Man and how fans claim the awful ending of No Way Home was actually really good, you guys, because it brought Spider-Man back to his roots. By taking away all of his friends and the things that make him happy, because apparently we can't have nice things. The reason I bring this up is because I've been thinking about my very long relationship with the Spider-Man character and franchise, and why the insistence that everything has to be a shot-for-shot recreation of the comics is not only incredibly boring, but also gravely bankrupt. And I think the best example of not only doing something new with the comics, but also improving on them, is Venom and Eddie Brock. Was this an unnecessary way of saying I want to talk about Venom? Completely. I must see through his fucking glass. So, Eddie Brock is a character I'll admit I didn't think that much about until recently. While I never had any negative feelings about him, there wasn't much to talk about in all honesty. He served his purpose as a villain well enough, and the little I had seen of his independent comics looked interesting, but there wasn't that spark that pulled me in. It was missing something and I wasn't sure what. And then the movies came out. Eddie is a completely and utterly unhinged main character, and to pretend he was ever a normal protagonist is a disservice to said character. That's without talking about the fact he's at least somewhat comfortable with eating people. What I find so appealing about his movie characterization is the clear change in motivation. Most of his more problematic and toxic behavior is completely erased because he doesn't have a pre-established connection with Peter Parker anymore. With this one change, both Eddie and Venom have completely new motivations, and now we need a new origin story. Eddie is now a journalist committed to seeking out the truth to the point where his inability to keep his goddamn mouth shut causes direct harm to himself and those he loves. This is a far cry from the Eddie that would steal pictures from his co-worker and or try and murder said co-worker out of jealousy. Frankly, making Eddie and Venom anti-authority with the occasional spike of stubborn arrogance works a lot better if the goal is to make him an anti-hero. The movie is inherently about a billionaire being predatory towards the homeless and vulnerable to achieve his passion project, so it would be a bit weird if Eddie wasn't openly opposed to said predatory behavior. You can still see personality traits from the previous versions, obviously. He's still intense, codependent, downright rude at times. Until the incident with Drake, he's convinced he's practically untouchable. It's only after he lost everything, including Anne, does he realize his actions have consequences, not just for himself but the people he cares about. And even though things are still extremely tense, he still makes it clear that he cares. Eddie is a traditionally masculine character, but he doesn't really come with any of the usual toxic bullshit that comes with this type of characterization. If you hadn't watched the movies, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Eddie was simply another cookie-cutter action hero, but that could literally not be further from the truth. Eddie drives a motorcycle, he likes sports, he drinks like a Brit, his tattoos, all things one may associate with traditional masculinity, but he balances out. Eddie is emotional, Eddie is sentimental, Eddie likes soap operas and sunsets. He cries and freaks out and isn't ashamed of breaking down, and doesn't attempt to hide it from Anne and Dan until after Venom gets involved, and that's out of a reasonable fear of the situation. In reality, he's a lot closer to a more mentally ill Scott Lang type character. Actually, you know what? Eddie Brock is a lot like Scott Lang. Both have shockingly good relationship with their exes and their exes' new partners. Both are morally good but sketchy looking men that have poor relationship with the law and ambitious billionaires. And both are trans and bisexual. Okay, maybe the last two aren't exactly canon, but let a girl dream, okay? But I'm getting off topic. I use Scott Lang as an example, but honestly, even he doesn't really fit. Eddie Brock is like if you put that one picture of a high-looking Daniel Radcliffe, a white true crime girl, and cocaine into a workout smoothie, blended everything together, and then set it on fire using Red Bull to feed the flames. The pure chaotic energy of this movie becomes even more unhinged because of how unreasonably ride or die Eddie is. Like, seriously, we like to meme on Venom for falling in love with the first white boy he met, but Eddie was definitely on Tumblr is all I'm saying. Okay, let's take that pin out and circle back to the movie versus comic discourse. This Eddie Brock would have never have happened if we had stuck strictly to the comic books, and while I know some of you would have preferred that, I also know some of you like this Eddie and his characterization. And yet you guys are still so insistent that they must be the bad guys and fully align with their comic personalities, even though they no longer have reason to be the bad guys. The obsession with the comics is killing creativity and good storytelling both both in the movies and fandoms. As I said, the biggest offender of this is the Spider-Man franchise, which is why I used the fact a heavily Spider-Man associated character was improved by breaking on the main universe to prove that following strictly in the comics' footsteps isn't always the best move. Eddie Brock is a deeply refreshing character for me, and even though the Venom movies are by no means perfect, his character is an underappreciated part of them. Frankly, was this video an excuse to bitch about dude bro comic fans and gush endlessly about Eddie Brock? Absolutely. Go watch Venom and see you next month.